Hi everyone, it's Ali with a card today made using the My Favourite Things Mermazing stamp set and a background made using Gelatos. They're metallic Gelatos and the colours that I'm going to be using are the metallic blueberry and the metallic mint out of this set. I'm just going to get a baby wipe that has been sitting out for a little while, so it's not really wet, but it's just moist, so I'm going to use that to rub on the end of the gelato and start by just moving the colour across the paper there. And it's not watercolour paper, it's just normal card that I use for making my cards. It's a heavier weight card, and I'm just rubbing on the end of the gelato and then putting that colour onto the paper. Then I'm going in with the mint and just sort of trying to blend those two colours on the paper. I'm not too worried about it being perfectly blended, so I'm going to stencil over the top of it. So I'm just covering the card. So I keep going until I'm happy with the depth of colour there. And then I'm going to use a Kaiser stencil that looks like scales. And this was, I think, in a really large sheet with 4 stencils kind of joined together, and I just cut them up. I'm just going to tape that down so that it doesn't move too much while I'm putting the gelatos on. Still using the same baby wipe, then I'm just starting to rub gently over the top of the stencil. And I started with the rubbing, but I actually found that that blue patch there that I'm working on, the paper started to peel a little bit, so I went to just pressing down with my baby wipe, which seemed to work a little bit better, just to get a bit more colour on there. And I'm happy with the coverage on the paper now, and it gives it a really lovely sheen, so I'm just dabbing some little lumpy bits off there from the gelatos and just drying with my heat gun to make sure it's completely dry. So there's the sheen. You can see it when I turn it a little bit, so it's quite nice and shiny. Gives a really lovely effect. I love gelatos, they're really easy to work with. Now I've got a bit of Tim Holtz Ranger paper, watercolour paper, and I'm going to stamp in VersaFine ink 2 of the mermaids, because at this stage I wasn't sure which one I was going to use. So I'm just going to stamp them in that black VersaFine Onyx Black ink and emboss it with clear embossing powder, because I want to watercolour these with the gelatos as well. So just stamping those and clear embossing powder, and then just heat setting that so that it's completely melted. And I've just sped through that a little bit as well. So now that's melted, and I'm going to use my gelatos again, so the same 2 colours, and just use an acrylic block and just put a little bit of that gelato directly onto the acrylic block in both those colours. I'm just going to get a thin brush and wet that, and then use that in the gelatos to paint onto the mermaids. And I didn't worry too much about wetting the paper first or anything like that. I just got going with the colouring and just added more gelatos as I wanted it darker in certain areas. And so I colour both of the mermaids with the blue and the green, and then I'm just actually using a skin tone gelato to colour in the face and the arms and body of the mermaids, and then a little bit of pink for their cheeks, just a light pink there for their rosy cheeks. I must apologise for my voice, sorry, I've been ill and I haven't had a voice for a couple of days, so I'm just getting it back now. Just continue to colour in those mermaids with the gelatos, and they've got a really lovely shimmer to them, which is nice as well. So, and you can see that there when I turn it to the light. Now I don't have the dies for this set. Actually, first I'm going to go over their scales or their body tail with a white gel pen. I think it's a pigment ink pen, a Signo Uniball, and just make little white scales on the top there. And I do that with both of them. And I don't have the dies for this set. As I said, I don't always buy the dies for stamp sets. I usually wait and see how much I'm going to be using them before I get the dies, because the dies are often quite expensive. So I'm just going to cut these mermaids out, fussy cut them out, and that didn't take too long. They're not too bad to cut out. And in the end I decided that I wanted to use the mermaid on the right with the blue hair. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut those out. I have purchased the dies for these in the end, but they're still on their way, so I'm still fussy cutting them at the moment. So they're all cut. And as I said, I decided I wanted to use the one with the blue hair. And I'm just going to use actually a sentiment that I loved. It was a freebie, a stamp set off a magazine. And the stamps in it are probably not my usual taste, but I just loved that sentiment. Always be yourself. Unless you can be a mermaid, then always be a mermaid, which I thought was gorgeous. So it's issue 43 of Creative Stamping that I got that from, and I'll just show you the other stamps that came with that issue. There was quite a few, and I find now that I have the Misty that I can stamp free magazine stamps a lot better. Usually before I had the Misty, I had a lot of trouble with them and they wouldn't stamp up evenly and they were quite thin and difficult to work with, but now I have the Misty, I use these magazine free stamps all the time. There's quite a few images there, and I thought actually they might be good for more masculine cards. Anyway, so I love this sentiment, so I wanted to put it on this card. So I'm just stamping up that sentiment with Versamark ink on black card, and I'm going to put white embossing powder on that and heat it and set it. Just making sure there's a good coverage there. So I've heat set that, and I'm going to just trim it down just a little bit. Originally I made it like a little banner end, but what happened was it was too big for the front of the card, so I did trim it down and round the corners to make it fit on the front of the card. So I'm just cutting down that base backing piece just so that it fits on the card, and rounding the corners of that as well, just so it matched in with the roundness of those scales on the stencil, and also rounded the card base too. So now I'm just going to adhere those pieces on with some double-sided tape. Just the backing piece first, making sure the scales are looping downwards. And then the sentiment, and then I'm actually going to pop the mermaid up with some 3D foam. So I'm just going to put the sentiment on with double-sided tape. And mount the mermaid up with a little bit of 3D foam. And that's pretty much it for the card for today. I hope you like it, and that if you have some gelatos, that you grab them out and give it a go. They're lots of fun, and as I said, these metallic ones are just gorgeous. And I finished her off with a little bit of gold on her star in her hair. Thanks for watching, and thanks for the comments. I'm loving them, and I will see you next time.